Captain Emma Morrison stood on the bridge of the spacecraft, valiant, and her eyes were fixed on the navigation display as the stars moved past them in endless silence, and the Deep Space Patrol had been routine for weeks now, with nothing but empty space and distant planets to keep them company. But everything changed when Lieutenant Jake Hamilton suddenly straightened in his chair and pressed his hand against his headset with a confused expression crossing his face. "Captain, I am picking up something strange," he said, while his fingers moved quickly across the glowing console in front of him, and the sound filled the quiet bridge, making everyone turn their attention toward him, because unusual signals in deep space were rare and often meant trouble of some kind. Amin walked closer to his station and leaned over to see the data scrolling across his screen in bright green letters and numbers that seemed to pulse with urgency. "What kind of signal?" she asked, and her voice was calm. But inside, she felt a small flutter of concern, because they were far from any known colonies or trading routes, and nothing should be out here in this empty part of space. "It is a distress call," Jake replied, and he adjusted several controls to clean up the static that crackled through the speakers, "and it is coming from the Vega sector, about 3 light years from our current position. And Captain, there is something very odd about this signal." Crossed her arms and waited for him to continue, while the other officers on the bridge stopped their work to listen, because distress calls always meant someone was in danger, and the law required them to respond no matter who was calling. "The signal is encrypted," Jake said slowly, "and it is definitely not human in origin, and the patterns match Xanther communication protocols. But there is more to it than just a simple call for help, Commander." Lucas Bennett approached from the tactical station, and his tall frame cast a shadow across the navigation console as he studied the readings with experienced eyes that had seen many years of service in the fleet. "What else is there?" Lucas asked, and his deep voice carried the weight of concern, because anything involving the Xanther usually meant political complications, since they were one of the most powerful species in the Galactic Council. Jake typed several commands, and a new window appeared on the main view screen showing complex biological data that looked like medical readouts and molecular structures. "There is a biological data packet embedded in the signal," Jake explained, "and it appears to be information about some kind of pathogen or disease, and the data suggests it might be weaponized." The bridge fell silent for a moment as everyone processed this information, because biological weapons were strictly forbidden by the Galactic Council, and any species caught developing them faced severe punishment and possible expulsion from the Council itself. Emma felt her jaw tighten, and she made a quick decision that would change everything, set a course for the signal origin. She ordered, and her voice was firm and clear, so everyone understood. This was not a suggestion, but a direct command, and contact Dr. Helen Price immediately, and tell her to come to the bridge right away. The helmsman acknowledged her order, and the Valiant began to turn in space as its powerful engines adjusted their trajectory toward the Vega sector, and Emma returned to her command chair while her mind raced through all the possible scenarios they might encounter when they arrived at the signal source. Lucas moved to stand beside her chair, and he spoke quietly so only she could hear him. This could be a trap," he said, and his eyes were serious, because he had learned through hard experience that space held many dangers, and not all of them were obvious, and the Xanther have been making noise about human expansion into their territories lately. "Lately, I know," Emma replied, and her fingers drummed once against the armrest before she stilled them and forced herself to appear calm, because a captain could never show doubt in front of the crew. "But we cannot ignore a distress signal, especially one that mentions a biological threat, and if someone is weaponizing diseases, we need to know about it within minutes." Dr. Helen Price arrived on the bridge, and she carried her medical scanner in one hand while her other hand held a datapad that she had been reading on her way up from the medical. "But Captain, Jake sent me the preliminary data," she said, without any greeting, and her voice was tight with concern. "And if I am reading this correctly, someone is broadcasting information about a weaponized virus that targets multiple species. Can you tell what kind of virus?" Emma asked. Helen shook her head, and her short dark hair swayed with the movement as she studied her scanner. "Data is incomplete, but what I can see suggests it is designed to attack the nervous system and cause rapid deterioration of neural pathways. And Captain, If this virus can target multiple species, including humans, then whoever created it has access to very advanced biological engineering. Emma stood up from her chair and walked to the main view screen where the stars streaked past as they moved toward their destination at faster-than-light speed. "Jake, send a priority message to Earth Command," she said, "and include all the data we have received so far, and make sure they understand we are investigating a possible biological weapon in Lucas. I want all crew on alert status, and prepare security teams for possible combat situations." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, and each person knew their role and performed it without hesitation because the Valiant was one of the best ships in the Earth Defense Fleet, and its crew had trained together for years. As the hours passed, they drew closer to the Vega sector, and Emma used the time to review everything they knew about the region and the Xanther Coalition. That controlled most of the territory there, and the Xanther were reptilian beings with golden scales and sharp minds, and they had been among the founding members of the Galactic Council 200 years ago, when the first interstellar government was formed. Humans had only joined the Council 20 years earlier, after proving they could travel between stars and contribute to galactic civilization, but the relationship had always been tense because humanity had grown and expanded faster than any species in Council history, and some of the older races resented this rapid advancement, had personally witnessed this resentment during diplomatic meetings where Xanther ambassadors had spoken against human colony ships and trade agreements, and there had been whispers of conspiracy theories claiming humans were somehow dangerous or untrustworthy, but Emma had dismissed these as simple prejudice against a newer species. Now, as they approached a Xanther-controlled sector with evidence of biological weapons, those whispers took on a darker meaning. "Captain, we are approaching the signal source," Jake announced, "and I have located it on the third moon of Vega Prime, and there are minimal life signs, maybe a dozen individuals. But Captain, I am also detecting weapons, signatures, and multiple ships in orbit." Emma felt her chest tighten, and she took a slow breath to steady herself. "Identify the ships," she ordered. Jake worked his console for a moment before responding. "They are Xanther military vessels, Captain, and there are 3 warships maintaining a blockade pattern around the moon, and they are heavily armed." Amass stood and straightened her uniform jacket, and she felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders like a physical thing. "Battle stations," she said in her voice. "It's carried across the bridge with absolute authority, and raise shields and charge all weapons in Lucas. Prepare a security team for possible boarding action." Red alert lights began flashing throughout. The ship and the crew moved quickly to their combat positions, while Emma watched the tactical display update with information about the Xanther warships, and they were powerful vessels, much larger than the Valiant, and in a straight fight the odds would not be in their favor. The view screen showed the Vega system growing larger as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and the third moon appeared as a gray sphere against the black of space, and orbiting above it were 3 sleek warships with hulls that gleamed like polished metal under the distant sun. "Captain, we are being hailed," Jake said, and he looked nervous because confronting Xanther military forces was not something anyone did lightly. On screen, Emma ordered the view screen changed to show a Xanther commander with golden scales marked by age and experience, and his vertical pupils were narrowed with obvious hostility. "Human vessel, you are trespassing in restricted space," he said, and his voice was cold and sharp like broken glass, "and withdraw immediately, or face the consequences of your intrusion." Emma kept her face neutral and professional. "I am Captain Emma Morrison of the Earth Defense Vessel Valiant," she replied, "and we received a distress signal from this location, and under Galactic Council law, we are obligated to respond to any emergency broadcast there." "There's no emergency here," the Xanther commander said, and his words came out like a hiss. "And this is an internal matter, and your presence is not welcome or required, and you will leave Noama." Took one step closer to the view screen then. "Perhaps you can explain," she said calmly, "and why someone from that research station is broadcasting warnings about a biological weapon." For just a moment, something changed in the Xanther commander's eyes, and it might have been surprise or fear or anger, but it was gone so quickly. Emma almost thought she had imagined it. "You know nothing human," he said, and his voice was filled with rage. "And leave now." While you still have the opportunity, the transmission cut off suddenly, and the view screen returned to showing the three warships, and Emma could see their weapons beginning to charge with energy that glowed bright against their hulls. "Captain, what are your orders?" Lucas asked, and his hand rested on the tactical controls. Ready to respond to whatever she decided, Emma looked at her crew and saw their faces watching her with trust and determination, and she thought about the distress signal and the biological weapon data and the 2 million people living on human colonies who might be in danger. "We are not leaving," she said, and her voice was strong and clear, and Jake continued. "Recording everything and send continuous updates to Earth Command and Lucas. Take your team to the shuttle bay and prepare for a surface mission, because we are going to that research station and we are going to find out what is really happening here, and if the Xanther try to stop us, then we will show them that humanity does not run from threats." The shuttle cut through the thin atmosphere of the moon, and its hull began to glow with heat as Lucas Bennett guided it toward the research station. Below and behind him, 5 Marines checked their weapons one final time, while their faces showed the calm determination of soldiers who had trained for moments exactly like this one. Sergeant Amy Walsh looked up from her equipment, and her eyes focused on the tactical display that showed the moon's surface getting closer with each passing second. "Commander, we have movement on the surface," she said, and her voice was steady despite the danger they were flying into, "and Xanther ground forces are deploying around the station entrance, and I count at least 20 soldiers, maybe more." Lucas adjusted their approach angle and watched the data scroll across his screen showing enemy positions and defensive fortifications. "How heavily armed are they?" he asked. Zoomed in on the readings and frowned. "Very heavily armed," she replied, "and they have energy weapons and portable shields, and they are setting up a perimeter like they are expecting." Corporal Danny Cruz leaned forward in his seat, and his young face was set with concentration as he studied the enemy positions through the shuttle's sensors. "They really do not want us getting inside," he said, and his fingers tightened on his rifle, "and whatever is in that station must be important." Lucas activated the communication system, and his voice went directly to the Valiant, where Captain Morrison was dealing with the Xanther warships. "Valiant, this is Bennett," he said, "and be advised we have hostile forces on the ground and we are going to need cover. Fire if things get bad down." Hirama's voice came back immediately, and Lucas could hear the sounds of the ship's weapons firing in the background. "Acknowledged, Lucas," she said, "and we have your back, and the Xanther ships are moving to intercept us. But we are keeping them busy, and get in there and get the information we need, and then get out fast." Shuttle touched down on the rocky surface. About 300 meters from the research station and through the viewports, Lucas could see the Xanther soldiers taking aim at their position shields. "At maximum," he ordered, and Amy and Danny, "Lay down suppressing fire, and everyone else move with me and stay together." The rear ramp dropped open, and the team rushed out into the low-gravity environment, where each step sent them bounding forward in long strides, and immediately energy bolts began streaking toward them from the Xanthor positions, and the air filled with the crackling sound of weapons. Fireme and Danny returned fire, and their weapons sent bright pulses of energy toward the enemy soldiers, who ducked behind rocks and defensive barriers, while more shots came back at the human team. Lucas led the charge toward the station and moved in the bouncing low-gravity stride that led him cover ground quickly, while Lieutenant Kevin Morris ran beside him, carrying a portable scanner that beeped and flashed with data there. He shouted over the noise of the battle, and he pointed toward an auxiliary airlock on the eastern side of the station, and that entrance is still active, and we can get in through there, though. Team changed direction and used a ridge of rock as cover from the increasingly heavy Xanther fire, and above them in the black sky the Valiant exchanged weapons fire. With the 3 warships and the flashes of light, it looked like lightning against the darkness. Amy pulled several small devices from her pack and threw them toward the Xanther positions before triggering them remotely, and the explosives detonated in sequence and created clouds of dust and debris that gave the team precious seconds of concealment. They reached the airlock, and Kevin immediately went to work on the control panel, and his fingers moved across the interface while he muttered under his breath about encryption codes and security protocols. "It is locked down," he said, and sweat ran down his face despite the cool air inside his helmet. But the encryption is old and I can break it if you give me 30 seconds, Lucas. And the others formed a defensive circle around Kevin and fired at any Xanther soldier who tried to advance, and the 30 seconds felt like hours as energy bolts impacted all around them and sent chips of rock flying through the air. Got it, Kevin announced, and the airlock door slid open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The team rushed inside, and Kevin sealed the door behind them, and the small chamber began to cycle through its pressurization sequence while red emergency lights bathed everything in an ominous glow. Stay alert, Lucas warned, and his weapon was raised and ready, and we do not know what is waiting for us inside this place. Inner door opened and revealed a corridor lined with laboratories and equipment rooms, and the station appeared deserted, but Lucas trusted his instincts that told him someone was still here watching and waiting. Can you locate the communications center, Lucas? Asked the lieutenant. Consulted his scanner and pointed down the corridor. That way, he said, and then take a left, and it should be about 50 meters ahead. Moved through the station in tactical formation, and each person watched a different direction to ensure no one could surprise them from behind or from side passages. And the research facility was larger than it had appeared from orbit, with multiple levels connected by lifts and access shaft. Signs of recent activity were everywhere, and half-eaten meals sat on tables in a common area, and computer terminals were still active with data scrolling across their screens, and personal belongings lay scattered as if people had left in a hurry. Whatever happened here, Lucas said quietly, and it happened fast, and people ran. They found the first body in a storage room near the communications center, and it was a Xanther scientist slumped against the wall with a datapad still clutched in its clawed hand, and the body showed signs of the same discoloration and foam around the mouth that indicated disease. Virus, Lucas said, and he knelt beside the body carefully. And it has already killed people here, Kevin carefully retrieved the datapad, and its screen was still glowing with an active message written in multiple languages, including English. He read it aloud, and his voice shook slightly. To anyone receiving this, the Xanther military has developed a biological weapon called Nightfall, and it is designed to target the neural systems of over 40 different species, including humans, and the weapon has been deployed on 3 colony worlds as a test, and millions will die unless the antidote is distributed, and the antidote formula is stored in the station's main computer. And I am Dr. Melissa Carter, and I am a human xenobiologist, and I was brought here against my will to work on this weapon, and I have sabotaged the deployment schedule and sent this warning. And if you are reading this, I may already be dead, and please stop them. Lucas felt his blood turn cold, and he looked at his team and saw the same shock and anger reflected in their faces. A human scientist, he said, and forced to create a weapon to kill her own people. They have deployed it on 3 worlds, Amy said, and her voice was hard with fury, in 3 human colonies. And millions of people. We need to find that computer core, Lucas said, and he stood up and checked his weapon, and we need it now. Team moved faster through the corridors and followed Kevin's scanner toward the main research hub, and as they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a group of figures wearing biocontainment suits that covered them completely. Lucas raised his weapon but stopped when he saw the universal medical symbol on their suits. Hold fire, he commanded. One of the figures stepped forward and removed their helmet and revealed a woman with short brown hair and eyes that showed exhaustion and fear and relief all at once. I am Dr. Melissa Carter, she said, and her voice was hoarse from stress and thank God someone received my signal, and we do not have much time. Lucas moved toward her quickly. Dr. Carter, I am Commander Lucas Bennett from the Earth vessel Valiant, and we are here to get you out and to recover information about this weapon. Melissa shook her head urgently and grabbed his arm. You do not understand, she said, and the Xanther Council ordered the deployment of Nightfall 6 hours ago, and it is already spreading on 3 worlds in New Terra and Proxima Haven and Kepler Station, and all human colonies, and over 2 million people infected. The numbers hit Lucas like a physical blow. There antidote, he said, and your message said there is an antidote. There is, and I have prepared the formula, Melissa replied, but the Xanther destroyed most of the supply here to prevent it from being distributed, and I managed to save 1 batch and enough to synthesize more. If we can get it to a proper medical facility, but Commander, there is something else you need to know. She pulled out a data chip and held it up. This contains evidence that the Xanther did not act alone, she said, and members of the Galactic Council approve this operation, and they see humanity as a threat, and expanding too quickly and gaining too much influence in Nightfall was meant to cripple humanity and to reduce our population and to break our will to explore. A tall man with gray hair stepped forward and removed his helmet as well. I'm Dr. Richard Hayes, he said, and formerly of the Council's Medical Research Division, and I tried to stop this from the inside, but they removed me and sent me here to ensure my silence. And Dr. Carter risked everything to get that message out, Lucas. Made his decision quickly, everyone. Stay close, he said, and Kevin download everything from the main computer and Amy prepare charges to destroy this facility once we are clear, and they do not get to keep any of this research. The team worked. Lucas contacted the Valiant, a gang captain. Morrison, we have the scientists and the antidote formula, he said, but you need to hear this. He transmitted the contents of Melissa's data chip to the ship, and even through the static-filled connection, he could hear Emma's sharp intake of breath counsel. Approval, she said. And Lucas, this is bigger than we thought, and this is a conspiracy at the highest levels. I know, Captain, Lucas replied. And what are your orders there? Was a brief pause, and Lucas could imagine Emma weighing their options and considering. The implications. We are getting you out of there, she said, and her voice was firm, and we are taking this evidence straight to Earth, and the Council wants to play politics with human lives, and then humanity is going to respond and get to the shuttle, and we will cover your extraction. The team gathered the scientists and began moving back toward the airlock and behind them. Amy's charges were armed and counting down to destroy every trace of the Nightfall research as they ran through the corridors. Melissa stayed close to Lucas. Commander, she said, and there is one more thing, and the Xanther have a fortress station in the Omega sector, and that is where they are coordinating the Nightfall deployment, and that is where they are keeping the master supply of the antidote, and if we are going to save those colonies, someone needs to capture that fortress. Lucas looked at her. How do you know this? He asked. Because I helped design their security systems, she said grimly. And before, I knew what they were planning, and I can get you inside, but we have to move fast, and the virus has a 2-hour incubation period, and after that it becomes lethal in 90% of cases. They reached the airlock and rushed through, while outside the Xanther ground forces had been reinforced, and the team's shuttle was taking heavy fire. This is going to be rough, Danny, said Lucas. Sealed his helmet, stay together and move fast, and remember, we are not just fighting for ourselves, and 2 million people are counting on us, and we cannot fail them. The airlock opened, and they charged out into battle. Captain Emma Morrison watched the tactical display as her ship shuddered under another barrage from the Xanther warships and the Valiants. Shields were holding but barely, and she needed to give Lucas and his team enough time to reach their shuttle and escape from the moon's surface. Return fire on the lead vessel, she ordered, and her voice was steady despite the chaos around her. And target their weapon systems. And Jake, do we have any word from Earth Command yet, Jake? Hamilton shook his head while his fingers worked across his console. Negative, Captain, he said, and we are too far out for real-time communication, but I have been transmitting everything on continuous loop, and they should receive our messages within the hour. The Valiant's weapons struck out at the closest Xanther ship and hit it along the side where its main batteries were located, and the enemy vessel rolled away, trailing atmosphere from a hull breach, but the other 2 ships moved closer, and their commanders were coordinating their attack patterns to overwhelm the Valiant's defenses. Captain, the tactical officer called out, and his voice was tight with stress, and Commander Bennett's team is taking heavy fire on the surface, and their shuttle's shields are down to 30%. And they will not survive much longer. Your ma made her decision. In an instant, helm, bring us down, she said, and we are going into the atmosphere. Everyone on the bridge turned to stare at her, because taking a ship the size of the Valiant into a planetary atmosphere was dangerous, even under perfect conditions, and in the middle of a battle. It was nearly suicidal, Captain. Lucas's voice came over the communication system, and he sounded confused. And did you just say you are coming down here? That is correct, Commander. Emma replied, and her hands gripped the armrests of her chair. And we cannot give you proper covering. Fire from orbit, so we are coming to you, and hold your position for 90 seconds. The Valiant's bow dipped toward the moon's surface, and the Xanther ships followed because they were unwilling to let their target escape, and the ship began to shake violently as it entered the thin atmosphere, and hull plates started glowing with the heat of friction. 60 seconds. The helmsman announced, and his hands were steady on the controls despite the violent shaking and the alarms that were sounding. Throughout the bridge on the surface, Lucas and his team had formed a defensive circle around the scientists, and they were firing constantly at the advancing Xanther soldiers who were determined to stop them from reaching their shuttle. And through his helmet display, Lucas watched in amazement as the Valiant descended from the sky like some massive metal bird, and its hull blocked out the stars. Above them, 30 seconds, Emma counted down, and she could see the moon's surface rushing up too. Meet them and weapons, prepare all forward batteries and fire on my mark. The Valiant leveled out barely 200 meters above the rocky ground and positioned itself directly between Lucas's shuttle and the Xanthor forces, and Emma could see the enemy soldiers on her view screen, and they were scrambling in confusion because their tactics had not prepared them for a capital ship at such close range fire. She commanded the Valiant's weapons opened up with wide dispersal pulses that covered a massive area, and the Xanther positions vanished in a series of explosions that sent rock and debris flying into the thin atmosphere and created a temporary shield of dust and fire. Bennett, move now, Emma ordered. Lucas's team sprinted toward their shuttle, and some of them were half carrying the scientists, who were not trained for combat situations, and behind them. Amy triggered the charges she had set at the research station, and the building erupted in a massive fireball that destroyed every trace of the Nightfall research forever. Shuttle lifted off with its engines straining under the acceleration, and it raced toward the Valiant's hangar bay while the two Xanther warships that had followed the Valiant down began firing again, and their weapons struck against the larger ships, weakening. Shield shuttle is aboard, Jake reported, and relief was clear in his voice. But, Captain, we need to get out of this gravity well immediately, or we will not make it. Helm, take us up, Emma said, in best speed, and all power to engines. The Valiant climbed and fought against the moon's gravity and the continuing weapons fire from the enemy ships, and one of the Xanther vessels moved to block their escape route, and Emma had only a split second to decide what to do. Ram them, she said. The helmsman's eyes went wide, but he obeyed without hesitation, and the Valiant surged forward with all its power focused on acceleration and its reinforced bow slammed into the Xanther ship's midsection with tremendous force, and the impact sent both vessels spinning through space, but the Valiant's superior mass and construction gave it the advantage, and the Xanther ship broke apart with its hull crumpling like paper free from the gravity, while the Valiant accelerated hard and left the remaining Xanther ship behind, and Emma allowed herself one moment to breathe before turning to face the next problem. Lucas burst onto the bridge, still wearing his combat suit, and Dr. Melissa Carter was right beside him, and her face showed exhaustion and determination in equal measure. Captain, we need to talk about what happens next. Lucas said. Emma nodded and gestured toward the data on her screens. Dr. Carter, welcome aboard, she said, and I have reviewed your evidence, and the Council's betrayal changes everything we thought we knew. Melissa stepped forward, and her hands were clenched into fists. Captain Morris and I understand the political implications, she said, but right now we have a more immediate problem, and those 3 colonies have less than 60 hours before the virus becomes lethal. And we need to get the antidote to them, and the only place with enough supply is the Xanther fortress in the Omega Sector A fortress. Emma repeated. And how well defended is this place? Extremely well defended, Melissa replied, and it is one of their primary military installations, with at least a dozen warships in permanent station and heavy planetary defenses, and under normal circumstances, it would take an entire fleet to capture it. Emma looked around at her exhausted crew, and then at the damage reports that were scrolling across multiple displays, and the Valiant had taken a severe beating, and they were hours away from any friendly support. We do not have a fleet, she said quietly, and we have 1 ship and 1 crew, and less than 3 days to save 2,000,000 people. The bridge fell into silence because every officer present understood the mathematics of their situation, and it was impossible, and the odds were so far against them that even attempting it seemed like madness. Emma stood up from her chair and straightened her uniform jacket. Dr. Carter, you said you designed their security systems, she said, and does that mean you know their weaknesses? A slow smile spread across Melissa's face. Captain, every weakness, she replied, and I know their patrol patterns and their response protocols, and they're blind. Spots and I can get a small team inside, but once we are discovered, all hell will break loose then. We make sure you are not discovered until it is too late, Emma said, and she turned to Lucas and Commander, pick your best people, and Dr. Carter. We'll brief you on the fortress layout, and you are going to infiltrate that station and secure the antidote supply. What will the Valiant be doing while we are inside? Lucas asked. Emma's smile was cold and determined. We are going to knock on their front door, she said, and we are going to keep them very, very distracted, and they will be so busy dealing with us that they will not notice you until it is too late over the next several hours as the Valiant raced toward the Omega sector at maximum speed. The crew prepared for what might be their final mission, and Lucas assembled a strike team of 8 people, including Amy and Danny, and 3 scientists who could properly identify and handle the antidote supplies. Melissa worked with them in the briefing room and projected holographic images of the fortress layout that showed a massive structure with multiple levels and hundreds of rooms. Antidote is stored here, she explained, and pointed to a section deep within the structure. And in the medical research wing, and the storage is climate-controlled and heavily secured, and you will need to get through at least 3 security checkpoints to reach it. What about guards? Amy asked. Dozens at minimum, Melissa said, and maybe hundreds. Because the fortress houses over 2,000 personnel, but most of them will be responding to whatever distraction. Captain Morrison creates. Lucas studied the layout carefully and memorized every corridor and junction and access point. Once we have the antidote, how do we get out? He asked. Melissa highlighted a hangar bay on the fortress's lower level there. She said, and it is used for supply ships, and if you can steal a vessel, you can escape before they seal the entire station. If Danny muttered under his breath, if Lucas agreed, but we do not have any choice, and those colonists are counting on us to succeed on. The bridge. Emma was having a similar conversation with Dr. Helen Price, who had come up from the medical bay. Captain, I want to go on record as saying this plan is completely insane, Helen said, but I also want you to know that I think it might actually work. Emma smiled slightly. Noted, Doctor, she said. And what is the status of our wounded from the battle stable? Helen replied, and we took some casualties, but nothing that will prevent people from performing their duties. Good, Emma said, and because we are going to need every single person at their station when we attack that fortress, and we need to hit them hard, enough to make them think we are trying to capture the entire structure by force, and while they are focused on us. Commander Bennett slips inside, Helen said, and it is clever, and it might even work if we are lucky. It has to work, Emma said, and her voice was firm, and because if it does not, then 2 million people die, and humanity loses its best chance to expose what the Council has done. The Valiant emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Omega sector and on the view screen. The Xanther Fortress appeared, and it was enormous and bristling with weapon platforms and defensive systems that could reduce their ship to debris in minutes. Jake, open a channel to Earth Command, Emma ordered, in full priority, and I want them to receive our next transmission no matter what happens. Channel open, Captain. Jake said. Emma took a deep breath and knew that her next words would be heard by everyone on Earth. This is Captain Emma Morrison of the Earth's Defense Vessel Valiant, she said, and we have uncovered evidence of a biological weapon attack on human colonies, proved by members of the Galactic Council, and 3 of our worlds are infected with over 2 million lives at stake. And we are engaging enemy forces to secure the antidote, and if we fail, let our last act be testimony, and Earth must know the Council cannot be trusted, and humanity must be ready to defend itself. She nodded, and Jake closed the channel. All hands, this is the captain, Emma said, and her voice carried throughout the entire ship, and in a few minutes, we are going to start a fight. We probably cannot win, and we are charging a fortress with 1 ship because it is the right thing to do, because 2 million people need us, and I will not order anyone to stay, but if you do stay, I promise we will make them remember this day. Nobody left their station, and Emma felt pride surge through her. "Let us begin," she said, "and helm take us in, and all weapons fire at will and Lucas. You are clear." For launch, the Valiant accelerated toward the fortress with all weapons blazing, and behind it a small stealth shuttle detached and carried Lucas Bennett and his team toward their impossible mission. The stealth shuttle drifted on minimal power and used the Valiant's weapons fire and the fortress's massive structure as cover while inside. Lucas Bennett watched his tactical display as captain. Morrison's ship bore down on the Xanther defenses with incredible courage and determination. "She is actually doing it," Danny whispered, and his eyes were wide as he stared at the view screen where the Valiant unleashed salvo after salvo against the fortress's outer platforms, and she is taking on the entire station by herself. "That is the plan," Lucas said grimly, "and every eye on that fortress is watching the Valiant right now, which means they are not watching us." And Melissa Guidus and Dr. Carter leaned over the pilot's controls, and her fingers marked waypoints on the navigation display. "With practiced precision, there is a service entrance on the lower southern quadrant," she said, "and it is used for waste disposal and supply deliveries, and the automated defenses are minimal because nothing important goes through there, normally nothing important except us," Amy said, and she checked her demolition charges one final time to make sure everything was ready for what lay ahead. The shuttle moved slowly and followed the curve of the fortress's outer hull, while around them space lit up with weapons fire as the Valiant fought against multiple Xanther warships that were converging on its position service. "Entrance ahead," the pilot announced, and Melissa, "You are up." Melissa connected her portable computer to the shuttle's systems and began typing rapidly while her face showed intense concentration. "I am using my old security credentials," she said, and routing them through a dozen proxy servers to make it look like routine maintenance, "and I just need to convince the system that we are supposed to be here." Seconds ticked by slowly, and on the view screen, the service entrance remained sealed as an armored door set flush with the hull, and Lucas felt his jaw tighten because if this did not work, they would have to find another way in, and time was something they did not have come on. Melissa muttered under her breath, "And I designed this system, and I know every back door and every override code, and just open for me." The door began to slide sideways with agonizing slowness, and Lucas let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. "Get us inside fast," he ordered. The shuttle slipped through the opening into a dimly lit docking bay that was filled with supply containers and automated cargo handlers, and the door sealed behind them and cut off their view of the battle outside. "We are in," Lucas reported over the communication system to the Valiant, and beginning infiltration. Nama's voice came back, and it was tight with strain from the battle. "She was fighting," acknowledged. She said, "And be advised, they are throwing everything they have at us, and you have maybe 30 minutes before they realize something else is happening." "Understood," Lucas replied, and Morrison out the team disembarked from the shuttle with weapons ready and moved through the docking bay in tactical formation, and the fortress's interior was built to Xanther's scale, which meant high ceilings and wide passages that made them feel small. Melissa led them through a series of maintenance tunnels where the fortress crew rarely ventured, and they passed automated systems and climate controls that were the mechanical heart of the massive station. "First checkpoint ahead," Melissa warned, and slowed their pace. "And 2 guards probably, but I cannot override the door without alerting their security systems," Lucas signaled. Kami forward, and she moved to the corner and produced a small device from her pack and extended it around the corner to get a visual of what they were facing. 3 guards, actually, Amy whispered, in Xanther military in full combat armor with heavy weapons. Lucas considered their options quickly because a firefight would alert the entire fortress, and they needed stealth for at least a little while longer. "Go quiet," he decided, "and Danny and Kevin with me and Amy cover our exit route." He holstered his energy weapon and drew a blade instead, and it was a monomolecular edge that could cut through Xanther scales and armor like paper, and beside him Danny and Kevin did the same. They moved around the corner fast and silent, and the 3 Xanther guards barely had time to register their presence before Lucas's team was on them, and it was brutal, efficient work that was over in seconds. When it was done, they dragged the bodies into a side room and continued forward, while Melissa's face had gone pale from witnessing the violence too. "More checkpoints," she said quietly, and then we reached the medical research wing. They pressed onward, and the sounds of battle outside filtered through the fortress walls as distant tremors that shook dust from the ceiling, and each checkpoint was either bypassed using Melissa's knowledge or overwhelmed with silent speed. Finally, they reached the medical research wing, and the doors were marked with biohazard symbols and security warnings in multiple languages that made the danger clear. "This is it," Melissa said. "And beyond this point, we are in the heart of their biological weapons program, and the antidote is in cold storage in the third room on the left." Lucas prepared to breach the door when Kevin's scanner began beeping urgent. "I am picking up movement," he said, and his voice was tense and multiple contacts converging on our position from 3 different directions. "They know we are here," Lucas said, and Amy sealed the corridor behind us, and everyone else moved quickly, burst through the doors into the medical wing, and sprinted down corridors lined with laboratories full of equipment, and behind them they could hear the sounds of pursuing Xanther soldiers shouting orders and readying their weapons on me. Triggered her charges and brought down a section of ceiling to block their pursuers, and it would buy them minutes at most, but minutes might be enough there. Melissa pointed to a reinforced door marked with cryogenic storage symbols. Kevin went to work on the door controls while the others formed a defensive perimeter, and the sounds of cutting tools echoed from where Amy had sealed the corridor because the Xanther were coming through fast. "Almost got it," Kevin said through gritted teeth. "And this encryption is military grade and much harder than the others." Energy bolts began impacting around them as the first Xanther soldiers broke through the debris, and Lucas and his team returned fire, and the corridor became a war zone filled with flashing lights and the smell of burning metal. Lucas shouted over the noise. "Got it," Kevin announced, and the door hissed open to reveal a chamber filled with racks of sealed containers, and each one was marked with medical codes. Melissa rushed inside and began scanning the labels rapidly while her hands moved with practiced efficiencies. "These containers right here," she said, and pointed to several rows, "and this is the antidote, and there is enough here to treat millions of people. Grab what we can carry," Lucas ordered, and we are not leaving empty-handed. The scientists and several Marines began loading the containers into portable carrying cases, while outside the firefight intensified as more Xanther reinforcements continued to arrive. "Commander, we are not going to be able to carry all of this and fight our way out," Danny said while firing around a corner at approaching enemies. Lucas looked at the dozens of containers and then at his small team, and Danny was right, because they could maybe carry enough antidote to save a few thousand people, but not the millions who desperately needed it then. "We do not carry it out," Lucas decided suddenly, "and we ship it out." "And Melissa, is there a direct transport system from here to the hangar?" But Melissa's eyes widened with understanding. "Yes," she said, "and the medical wing has an automated cargo system for moving sensitive materials, and if we can load the antidote into transport pods, they will be delivered directly to any hangar we specified." "Who do it?" Lucas commanded, and Amy and Danny by them time, and Kevin helped the doctors with the loading, and we are shipping everything we can. The team worked frantically as the battle raged around them, and Melissa programmed the transport system to direct pods full of antidote toward the hangar bay where they had planned to steal a ship for their escape last. "Pod is away," she announced, "but Commander Security will see the transport requests, and they will know exactly what we are doing." "We'll let them," Lucas said, "and we are past stealth now, and everyone fall back to the hangar, and we move fast and we stay together." Ran through the fortress corridors, while the sound of alarms echoed all around them, and the Xanther were fully alert now, with soldiers pouring in from every direction, and Lucas's team fought a running battle as they leapfrogged back in tactical retreat. They lost Corporal Lisa Grant when a Xanther energy bolt caught her in an unshielded section of her armor, and Danny tried to drag her body forward because no soldier wanted to leave a fallen comrade behind. "Let her go," Lucas ordered, and he hated the words, but they had no choice. "And we cannot save her, but we can still save millions. So move." They reached the hangar bay to find the antidote pods already arriving through the automated transport system, and several Xanther supply ships sat in their docking cradles unattended in the chaos. That one, Melissa pointed to a mid-sized cargo vessel, "and it is fueled and ready to fly." They ran toward the ship, and began loading the antidote pods into its hold. The hangar's main doors burst open and Xanther soldiers flooded inside, and there were at least 50 of them with weapons. "Raise Damie, seal those doors," Lucas ordered Damie. Threw her remaining charges, and the explosives detonated to bring down the hangar entrance in a cascade of twisted metal and sparks, but more Xanther were already inside and taking up firing positions behind. "Cargo containers, get the ship started," Lucas shouted to Melissa and the other scientists, "and we will hold them off." His remaining team, now down 2, just for Marines and himself, formed a defensive line, and the firefight was intense, with energy bolts crisscrossing the hangar in deadly patterns. Kevin went down next when his shield failed under concentrated fire, and then Danny took a hit too. The leg-in collapsed with a cry of pain. Amy moved to help him, but Lucas pulled her back to the ship. He ordered, and everyone retreat to the ship. Now they fell back while dragging Danny between them, and the Xanther advanced with their superior numbers overwhelming the small human team, and Lucas knew they would not all make it aboard before the enemy reached them. "Mamie, you and Danny get on that ship," Lucas ordered, "and I will buy you the time you need, Commander." "No," Amy protested. "That is an order, Sergeant," Lucas said firmly, "and get the antidote to those colonies, because that is all that matters now." Lucas turned and charged back toward the advancing Xanther, while firing his weapon and drawing their attention away from his team, and behind him he heard Amy screaming his name and heard the ship's engines beginning to power up. He dove behind a cargo container and reloaded his weapon while around him. The hangar was filled with chaos and smoke and fire and the sounds of battle. And he was one man against an army, and he knew how this would end. Then the wall exploded inward with tremendous force. The Valiant, battered and burning, crashed through the fortress's outer hull directly into the hangar bay, and its weapons blazing cleared the hangar of Xanther soldiers in seconds. "Bennett, get aboard that cargo ship." "Emma," Morrison's voice roared over the communication system, "and we are getting you out of here right now, Lucas." It did not need to be told twice, and he ran for the cargo vessel as the Valiant's weapons provided covering fire, and he leaped aboard just as the ship lifted off with Amy pulling him inside. Cargo ships shot out of the hangar, followed closely by what remained of the Valiant, and behind them the Xanther fortress burned with its defenses shattered by Emma's desperate assault. "Captain, you are completely crazy," Lucas said over the communication system, and he was laughing with relief and shock. "Just returning the favor," Commander Emma replied. "And now let us get this antidote where it needs to go, because we have colonies to save them." Valiant limped through space with its hull breached in dozens of places, and its shields were completely offline, and half of its weapon systems were destroyed beyond repair. But beside it, the stolen cargo ship maintained formation with its hold filled with enough antidote to save the infected colonies, and that was all that got it on the Valiant's bridge. Emma Morrison sat in her damaged command chair and monitored their progress toward New Terra, which was the closest of the 3 infected colonies, and they had 12 hours to reach it before the virus entered its lethal phase and started killing people by the thousands. "Captain, we are receiving multiple transmissions," Jake Hamilton reported, and his console was lighting up with incoming signals and Earth Command and Council headquarters and at least 30 different news agencies are all trying to contact us. "Ignored them all for now," Emma said, and her voice was firm despite her exhaustion, "and our priority is getting this antidote distributed and saving those colonists, and once those people are safe, then we can deal with politics." But politics, it seemed, would not wait for anyone, because the view screen flickered to life without anyone activating it, and showed the face of Council Chancellor Vornis, who was a Xanther elder whose golden scales were marked with the passage of many years. "Captain Morrison," Vornis said, and the voice was cold and filled with barely controlled rage, "and you have attacked a Council military installation and stolen classified materials and killed dozens of personnel, and you will surrender your vessel immediately and submit to arrest." Emma stood slowly from her chair, and her uniform was torn and blood-stained from the battle, but she held herself with dignity and strength. "Chancellor Vornis," she said, "and I have evidence that you and other council members authorized a biological weapon attack on human colonies, and 2 million of my people are dying right now because of your actions, and the only thing I am going to surrender Is this evidence to every news organization in the galaxy? Vorness's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. You are making accusations you cannot prove, he said, and the council will deny everything, and your word alone means nothing to anyone. Not my word alone, Emma said, and she gestured to Jake, who transmitted a data packet directly to the council channel, and that is testimony from Dr. Melissa Carter, who is the human scientist you forced to work on your weapon, and it includes security footage from your fortress and communications between council members approving the attack and complete documentation of the Nightfall virus and Chancellor. I have already sent copies to Earth Command and every major news network in human space, and this conversation we are having right now is being broadcast live to 17 billion people across all human territories. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Vorness's reptilian face. "Are bluffing," he said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Emma replied, and she smiled coldly. "And why do you not check your own news feeds, Chancellor, and see how many species are watching this right now, and see how many are asking why the Council authorized genocide against humanity?" The transmission cut off abruptly, and Emma sat back down in her chair while her hands shook with adrenaline, but around her the bridge crew erupted in ragged cheers, because they had just challenged the most powerful political body in the galaxy. "Captain, Earth Command is ordering us to proceed to New Terra at maximum speed," Jake reported, "and they are sending a relief fleet to back us up, but it will not arrive for another day then." "We do this alone," Emma said, "and helm best speed to New Terra, and Lucas, how is the antidote holding?" Up in that cargo ship stable, Captain Lucas's voice came back over the communication system, and Melissa says it will remain viable for at least 48 hours, and we will make it in time. The journey to New Terra took 11 long hours, and they were the longest 11 hours of Emma's life, because reports kept coming in from the infected colonies, and hospitals were overflowing with sick people in the streets. Were filled with panic as the virus entered its final stages and people began dying. Earth Command transmitted new orders stating that Emma was to deliver the antidote and then proceed directly to Earth to testify before a special tribunal, and the Council had formally demanded her arrest, but Earth's government was refusing. "And citing humanity's right to self-defense against acts of war, Captain, we are receiving a transmission from a Council fleet," Jake announced as they approached New Terra, and his voice was tense, "and it is being led by Chancellor Vorness himself, and they are demanding we turn over the antidote to their custody." Emma stood from her chair, and her decision was already made. "The Chancellor, that the antidote belongs to humanity," she said, "and we will distribute it ourselves, and if he tries to interfere, he will discover exactly how desperate and dangerous we can be when protecting our own people." The view screen, a fleet of 20 Council warships, emerged from faster-than-light travel and formed a blockade around New Terra, and at their center Vorness's flagship held position with its weapons charging to fire. "This is your final warning, Captain Morrison." Vorness's voice came over the communication system, "and surrender the antidote now, or we will take it by force, and the Council cannot allow this situation to escalate any further." Emma looked at her exhausted crew and at her damaged ship, and at the impossible odds they faced, because 20 warships against one crippled vessel and a cargo ship was not a fight they could win. "Lucas," she said quietly over a private channel, "and how fast can your ship go if you dump all non-essential systems and divert everything to engines fast?" "Enough to reach the planet before they can intercept us," Lucas replied, and he understood immediately what she was planning. "And but Captain, that would leave you here alone to face 20 warships by yourself. That is the idea," Emma said, "and you get that antidote to the surface and distribute it to every medical center on New Terra, and then head to the other infected colonies, and that is an order." Commander Captain Lucas started to protest. "Bennett, 2 million people are counting on us," Emma said, and her voice was hard, "and someone has to hold this line long enough for you to get through. And now Gotha cargo ship broke formation suddenly and accelerated toward New Terra at maximum speed while the Council fleet moved to intercept, but the Valiant positioned itself between them and their target. "All weapons fire at will," Emma commanded, "and target their lead ships and make them pay attention to us instead of that." Cargo ship the Valiant's remaining weapons opened up and struck at the Council warships with everything it had left, and it was a futile gesture because one ship against An entire fleet could not win, but it bought Lucas's precious seconds to get closer to the planet. The Council ships returned fire, and their weapons tore into the Valiant's already damaged hull with devastating effect, and alarms blared across every deck as sections depressurized and systems failed one after another. Shields. At 5%, the tactical officer reported, and his voice was strained, and hull breaches on all decks. And we cannot take much more of this. Captain Nema gripped her armrests tightly and watched the cargo ship streak toward the planet's surface, and they were almost there, and she just needed to buy them a little more time, Captain. I am detecting new contacts, Jake shouted suddenly, and multiple ships with human signatures. And it is the relief fleet from Earth Command, and they arrived early on. The view screen, a dozen Earth Defense Fleet vessels emerged from faster-than-light travel, with their weapons already charging, and at their head was the flagship, Defiant, which was commanded by Admiral William Foster. This is Admiral Foster, to Captain Morrison. A gruff voice came over the communication system, and sorry, we are late to the party, but it looks like you saved us some excitement. You have felt tears of relief streaming down her face. Admiral, good to see you, she said, and the cargo ship needs to reach the surface with the antidote already on it, Captain? Foster replied, and then his voice became hard. In Council Fleet, this is Admiral Foster, and you are ordered to stand down immediately and withdraw from human space, and any attempt to interfere with medical relief efforts will be considered an act of war against humanity. Chancellor Vornis's voice came back, filled with fury. You dare threaten the Council, he said. And this is beyond your authority. My authority comes from protecting human lives, Chancellor Foster replied. And right now, you are the threat to those lives, and this is your last chance. So withdraw now, or we engage for. A long moment's silence filled the communication channels while the Council fleet and Earth's fleet faced each other across space with weapons charged and ready in fingers hovering over firing controls. Then slowly the Council ships began to withdraw and turn away from New Terra, and Vornis's flagship was the last to leave, but even it eventually turned and conceded the field to Earth Captain Morrison. Admiral Foster said, and permission to come aboard because I think we have a lot to discuss on New Terra's surface, Doctor. Melissa Carter supervised the distribution of the antidote, and medical teams rushed to every hospital and every clinic and every place where people were dying from the nightfall. Virus Lucas Bennett stood beside her and watched as the first patients received treatment, and within hours, the virus's progress began to reverse, and within days, the death toll stopped climbing because the antidote worked. We did it, Melissa said quietly, and we actually saved him. Lucas nodded while thinking of the people they had lost along the way, and Corporal Grant and Lieutenant Morris and the scientists who had died in the research station, and the cost had been high, but they had won. 3 weeks later, Emma Morrison stood before the Earth Senate and gave testimony about everything that had happened, and the Council had tried to deny all the charges, but the evidence was overwhelming because Dr. Deep's cementation and the security footage and the intercepted communications all proved the Council's guilt beyond any doubt. Several Council species had already withdrawn from the organization in protest, and the Xanther Coalition was in political turmoil with Chancellor Vornis facing criminal charges, and the galactic order that had existed for decades was crumbling and falling apart. Captain Morrison, the Senate chairman, asked, and what do you think humanity's role should be in this new reality we face? May thought carefully before answering. For too long we have tried to fit into the existing order, she said, and we tried to prove ourselves worthy of a place in the galactic community, but that community betrayed us and tried to exterminate us because they feared our potential and our growth. She paused and looked at the assembled senators and at the cameras broadcasting her words across human space and beyond to other worlds. Think it is time humanity stopped asking for permission to exist, she continued, and we have proven we can stand on our own and defend ourselves and achieve the impossible when it is necessary, and I think we should forge our own path forward and build our own alliances based on mutual respect and shared values, and if the Council does not like it, then they will discover what we are truly capable of. When we are threatened, the Senate chamber erupted in applause and outside across Earth and every human colony, people watched and cheered because the species that had nearly been destroyed had emerged stronger and fiercer and completely unafraid. Morrison had followed a distress signal into the unknown, and she had uncovered a conspiracy and fought possible battles and saved millions of lives. But more than that, she had shown the galaxy something it had never seen before, and that was a humanity that refused to be victims and would fight back against any threat and would never surrender no matter the odds. Distress signal had made humanity fearless, and the galaxy would never be the same again, and every species now knew that. Humans would protect their own with a ferocity that could not be stopped, and from that day forward, no one would ever again mistake human kindness for human weakness, because Emma Morrison and her crew had proven that humanity was done asking permission, and ready to take their place among the stars on their own terms.